Welcome to the TEFL Commute, Season 2, Episode 1. Yes, we're back. Episode 1, Classrooms, in which we talk about unusual places where we've taught, what classrooms were like 100 years ago, the effect on the classroom on learning, and what makes a perfect classroom. Right, off we go.
You're listening to the TEFL Commute podcast.
Hi, and welcome everyone to the TEFL Commute. We're kicking off Season 2, Episode 1 today, where we're going to be talking about classrooms. The TEFL Commute is a podcast for language teachers, which is not about language teaching, but the subject will sometimes come up. My name is Lindsay Clanfield.
And I'm Shaun Wilden, and Lindsay Clanfield's been practicing that intro over the summer by the sounds of it.
Yes, I have. I'm getting it better each time.
Yeah, but that was a first take. Well done.
Anyway, Shaun, how was your summer?
Working, but good, yeah. No, my break's coming up in a few months, so I'm going to take a holiday then, so I worked through the summer. But it was interesting. Yours?
Good, very relaxed. I'm quite happy to be back at work now, though. I've had enough off time, so...
Off time. Oh, yeah, you were in the mountains or something, I guess.
So I'm happy to be back in it and kind of getting ready to go back into the classroom.
Oh, you see, I've just left the classroom because in the summer I spend my time in the classroom training teachers in Oxford. So I've had some unusual classrooms this year. One thing Oxford University has is unusual classrooms, that's for sure. But
I kind of imagine them like, are there like Hogwarts type classrooms at Oxford University, like really nice?
It depends what college you're in. I've taught in some odd rooms and some really old kind of ornate rooms. The ornate rooms are more kind of where we have dinner and those kind of things. Whereas the classrooms, I guess, are just, to me, they often seem like just random places, the random spaces they've turned into a place to teach.
Are you assigned your classroom a bit like kind of like the sorting hat?
Unfortunately, no, we're assigned our classrooms, but not by the sorting hat, unfortunately. But as classrooms go, they're not the worst I've ever been in, and they're not the best I've ever been in. But yes, so now I'm back to my usual classroom, which is my desk in my house.
This is a good segue because our topic today is classrooms in general. And one of the things that I did over the holiday was I did a little call out on Facebook. I think you did as well, Shaun, where we asked other English teachers the most interesting, strange, funny, horrible, wonderful classroom they've taught in. You want to hear some of the things? We've got some pretty interesting things. I'm going to read them off to you.
Go on then.
Yeah. Okay. We got somebody, Mark Andrews, taught on top of a double-decker bus and even has a video to prove it. Lots of virtual world ones, sort of Second Life kind of crazy classrooms. Somebody taught in the basement of the Bundestag, Parliament building in Berlin, where visitors aren't allowed to go. Another one here was boats. People have taught on sailing yachts, for example. Other ones on other boats. Someone shared that they had conversation classes in beer gardens in Munich in the late 80s. That was Andy Cowell.
I think the beer garden and pub is probably quite a normal
one. That is, I think, quite a common one. Raquel Oliveira in Brazil taught in a urologist office with themed supplies. I didn't really quite know what to reply to that, so I just kind of put a shocked smiley. Lots of people teaching in kind of like, bad areas, like in the hallway, in a closet. I've taught in like sort of supply closets in businesses where they just didn't have a classroom, so we were sort of in the photocopy supply closet.
I usually end up when that happened to me. It used to be the canteen. The only available space was in the canteen, and you have to rock up and teach there.
Other people have said, for example, Susan Hilliard, upstairs in McDonald's in Buenos Aires, in the cellar of an old university building, in a bars again. Teacher Nicola Meldrum taught 3 doctors in a hospital ward. So it was in an office in the ward, but kind of like a goldfish bowl. More bus.
A bus came when I was kind of researching the topic for the podcast. If you put in unusual classrooms, bus comes up in the images, Google Images, quite a lot as a classroom space.
I guess that's the thing with English teachers, is that the kind of teaching that we do, you can really do like anywhere. So I'm sure there are lots of other teachers who have had quote unquote classes, if we take conversation classes or private students as an example, in all kinds of places. I think for me, one of the most interesting places I taught a class was on a plane at the Manchester Concorde Airplane Museum, although it was a class for teachers, like a teacher training session. But I'm going to count that as well. What about you, Shaun?
I know the strangest places are not that strange compared to those that we got for the call out. I think, like you said, odd spaces in companies with it. I think I've done more training sessions in more beautiful places, like in grand libraries and stuff like that, than actual teaching. But it made me wonder that it's the concept of classroom, as in just the place a teacher rocks up to teaching. So when we talk about classroom, if it's a pub, does that become the classroom, or is there a certain thing that we need to define this as being a classroom space?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I suppose if you ask someone to draw a classroom, someone who's not a teacher draw a classroom, they'd probably all draw the same kind of thing. A square with a board at the front and desks, chairs probably in rows, or maybe around tables or things like that. This does remind me, we're now segueing into our next section. Thanks, Shaun. It reminds me of, there's like a meme that goes around, especially online and on Facebook and on YouTube and stuff. I've seen several videos for it, and at TED Talks and things like that, of, there's like a little anecdote that Rip Van Winkle, the guy who goes to sleep and travels into the future, he wakes up after 100-year sleep, and he sees everything is so different in the world. Like, he goes out and he sees all this new technology everywhere, and he sees hospitals have changed, and he sees all these things have changed. And then he goes to a classroom and he thinks, oh, this is exactly like it was when I went to sleep 100 years ago. Have you heard this meme?
I've kind of heard, I've not heard it in that particular way, but I think you often hear, especially I think tech writers often talk about the fact the classroom hasn't changed in 100 years.
Yes. Sometimes it's 100 years. Sometimes they go up to like 1,000 years, 400 years. I did a collection of quotes from TED Talks where they go right back to, like, Roman times or the medieval ages and stuff like that, saying it hasn't changed. I don't think it's really true, though.
I just also wonder how much different, just being devil's advocate, does it actually, would you expect it to change? I mean, okay, things would change, like blackboard to whiteboard to interactive whiteboard, maybe, but really, would you expect the physical space of the classroom to change that much over that much time?
And, well, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of the people pushing this, the EdTech people on TED Talks often pushing this, have an agenda, I would think, which is often they're with virtual schools, things like Udacity or the big MOOCs and stuff like that. So they're kind of pushing for a revolution in education in that way. And therefore what they're doing, I think, is, I read an article about this from Brendan Whiteman. We can provide a link in the show notes. This was at ELT Jam. He talks about narratives of change in education, and he calls this one the classrooms are the same 100 years ago as the no change narrative. And in his words, it's used as a stick to prod, poke, and sometimes bash both teachers and the education system, depending on who's holding the stick. So the message of this no change narrative is that education hasn't changed or progressed in centuries.
So is it therefore using the classroom just kind of as the thing that because the classroom itself hasn't changed, therefore education hasn't changed, and what we do in education.
Exactly, it's that kind of a thing as well. And also coming back to what Whiteman says in his article, which I quite liked as well, he says it kind of negates lots of big changes that did happen in education over the last century, especially in Europe, in the United States, and so on. So even talking about like how many girls are now in classes, handicapped children where they are, segregation, what the curriculum is focused on, etc., etc. And often the starting point of the 100 years ago is that there's not enough technology in classrooms. But even that is changing. If we think that in the UK, more than £1 billion has been spent on education technologies, £1 billion in primary and secondary schools, and this is happening in other countries as well. Not to say that it's all being used correctly or being used in the best possible way, but I'm not sure about this narrative of classrooms today look exactly like they do 100 years ago.
That's true. I don't think I don't think the narrative that you can draw the parallel of classroom being education hasn't changed. Although I do, you talk about the UK there, I think of some of the countries I've worked in where the classroom, really probably hasn't changed that much. This archetypal classroom of a blackboard, of a stage where the teacher sits and the desks in rows, which I do, I guess in terms of a physical environment, might not appeal to the students. That's not to say that the teaching that goes on there isn't, current, up to date or whatever, but I can see why there might be negativity about this idea of it being fixed as what it looks like, and how people respond to it.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is actually when Second Life started, being the next big thing, the virtual world of Second Life, there were lots of very progressive and different kinds of classrooms being built there. But a lot of classrooms actually in Second Life were reproductions, although more modern looking, of the traditional classroom. So like you would virtually go and sit in a thing where the chairs might be more comfortable, or there might be sort of like you could see the sky and stuff like that, but it would still be everyone sitting around with the lecturer up in front, talking alongside a screen showing video or showing whatever. So it's interesting that even then, and I know that there were notable exceptions to this, but I think a lot of the virtual classrooms where really, you could do whatever you wanted were still like regular classrooms. So is there something about that space that has survived all these hundreds, thousands of years, whatever we say, that means that it is a place that people associate with learning? I was
going to say, is it the experiential kind of association with learning that that when you cross the boundary into that place, it's a place where you learn, and therefore it kind of gets because it's very deep for us, isn't it?
We're getting deeper than we usually do.
No. It was an interesting discussion. Do you think, therefore, that the actual physical classroom has an effect on learning? I mean, people say that what the teacher does has an effect on learning, but the classroom itself, do you think it affects learning?
Yeah, I know this is often, this is very pertinent to language teachers because we, even in pre-service training, we talk about the use of the classroom space. And so, if you're doing things for pair work, you ideally want to try to set up the classroom in which it would be easier to do that. If you're setting up the classroom for an exam, that will also dictate how you set up the seats, for example, or if you're wanting to do a kind of, there's a small group of you, let's say 8 to 12 people, you can set it up in a circle or a semicircle where everyone is kind of sitting around, almost like a kind of United Nations type feel to it.
We do like moving furniture as ELT teachers, don't we?
Well, we do, and there's often whether or not we're able to, if you're in classrooms where the seats are all locked down. But I think that the fact that is often talked about in pre-service and often done by language teachers would indicate that the classroom layout does have an effect on learning. And I notice it immediately from when we switch from everyone sitting in lines, or rows rather, to everyone sitting in a circle. I do notice a difference myself as a teacher.
Do you have a preference?
It depends what kind of stuff I'm teaching and how big the class is. For example, if I am giving a seminar to 80 people, rows is just fine. I'm not going to try to reorganize everyone. There just seems to be too many people to do that. Although I did give one in a ballroom where everyone was sitting around tables, so it felt like I was giving a speech at a wedding, but it was actually really good because when I said, okay, talk at your tables about what we just went over with here, there was some nice buzz groups, which I don't get as well if I'm addressing a big auditorium with everybody in rows. I can sort of say, hey, check with a partner, talk about this with a partner. Never quite as good. So
yeah, I mean, there are lots of parameters that determine that. I mean, obviously, rows work perhaps best in very large classes. Whereas, as you say, with a smaller class, you might change it around. Is it just? I mean, we're talking there about obviously the seating arrangement and with it. But if you kind of look on, if you look at what people say about the effect of classrooms on learning, then obviously there's much more to it than just the furniture. People talk about the light and the temperature and the noise and all those things having an effect on learning. That if there's no actual daylight in the classroom, then the learning might drop off, or if there's noise, then students will be distracted. It's a lot of people have written a lot of things about the environment of the classroom.
I guess that would also tie in with, we're getting really serious again here now, but it would tie in with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So your basic needs to be met to get motivation would be the bottom rung of that pyramid of needs is your physiological needs. So that would be, is there enough light? Is it too hot? Or is it the right temperature? Is it too cold? And so on. If those aren't being met, then you cannot get motivated for other things. I mean, it would just be too distraction.
And now it's time for some more teaching philosophy from a Facebook meme.
Stand tall, keep your head high, laugh, smile, give hugs, lots of hugs. You are a teacher. You are a hero. Author unknown.
If you think we're being too serious, then Lindsay, there is a website. Going back to your classroom seating, there is a website that is dedicated just to different classroom desk arrangements. I don't think it's been updated in a while, but they have lots of them. And I did notice that we talked about. I think you talked about rows and that. I'm always familiar with the horseshoe. I think my class, in the school that I worked in, it was always the horseshoe. And I did notice on this website that they gave their seating arrangements some interesting names. So I picked out 5 of the names for you, and I wonder if you could tell me what the seating arrangement would be. So I'll start with one you should get based on what you've said previously. So the first one they said, and this works best for groups of about 16 people apparently. So they've called it the lasso.
The lasso, as a lasso,
lasso. Yeah, sorry.
Whatever. Okay. So this would be like one person, one chair at the front, and then it kind of all rings around like a circle, like an O.
Yes, that's right. A big O, big circle group. That's the name of that. So that was the easy one to get you started. So you're a bit of a game geek as well. So another classroom one they've named as Tetris.
Tetris. Oh, is that kind of so you're at the front, the teacher's at the front and can move horizontally alongside the thing, and everyone else would be in different kind of blocks, an L shape of.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be some kind of square blocks of desks, some L-shaped blocks. Obviously, if you know the game Tetris, you know the kind of shapes that they would be.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
So it's based on that. Okay, so I think that's still quite a normal, a logical name for one. So let's get a little bit. So we'll go to a big class scenario. So she's the person, I don't know if it's she, on the website, describes this setting, and the name they give to it is pancakes and bacon.
What? Pancakes and bacon. Okay, I'm going to guess. 2 round formations of students sitting in circles at the beginning. Behind them are rows of other circles, students, like the rashers of bacon.
It's not a bad guess, actually. It's kind of one long big row at the front, and then a kind of a semicircle to be the pancake for it. Now I can't remember. So the example would be what they say on the website. This is a good example of a style that would work well with a performance class or a debate panel. The students sitting an arc while the spectators face them at the other end. Let's do a couple more then, 2 more then. So the next one, if you think pancakes and bacon was a great name, what about curly eyebrows?
Curly eyebrows. Okay, one student sitting facing 3 or 4 students in front of them. So it's like an interview kind of thing, and that would be repeated.
No, I can see you clicking. The picture that they have on the website to go with it is 3 rows, but rather than being in straight rows, the rows are kind of bent a little bit. So the row looks like it's an eye, the bend of an eyebrow over it. Okay, your final one. You're not doing too badly, actually. You're doing better than I anticipated. Your final one has got the wonderful name of cake, anyone?
Cake, anyone?
Yeah, so you can imagine walking to a training session today. Okay, today we're going to do seating.
Oh, I think I know. Is this one like a cake with a slice taken out of it? Is that what it would look like?
No.
No.
But that's interesting. I want you to create that in the next classroom.
Is it like tables all scattered around a bit like at a restaurant, and the teacher kind of moves around like a waiter?
You're not bad. That's not bad. It's basically pods of 2 or 4 desks, depending on the size of your desk, scattered around. Yeah, actually, yeah. Looking at the picture, I guess looks like a seating arrangement from a restaurant. So that's not bad. Very well done. Apparently, Cake Anyone is good for small group work and partners together. So it's we'll put the website address on our website, so you can go and have a look at all these wonderful names that they give the seating arrangements.
Hey, Shaun, talking about classrooms, maybe it's time to get brushed up on our jargon. Let's bring back James, the jargon buster, to tell us a little bit about some of the terms that are currently associated with classrooms.
The main change in classrooms in the last few years has been the growth of online teaching, and as your humble jargon buster, I'm here to help you cut through the acronyms and buzzwords of this brave new world. Today we're going to look at VLEs, flipped and blended classrooms. Here we go. So let's kick off with a term that many of you will have heard of, VLE. Standing for Virtual Learning Environment, it's a term that has been in popular use since the mid-90s and refers to any web-based study environment. They can take many forms, and you may also hear them called an electronic educational technology, e-learning, a learning platform, a CMS, content management system, or an LMS, learning management system. So this is our catch-all term for some kind of online classroom. Another popular buzzword is the flipped classroom, where the students do the kind of learning you normally associate as being in the classroom at home, and in class they focus on higher order thinking skills such as problem finding, collaboration, and working in groups. Similar terms such as peer instruction have been around since the 90s. But the first truly flipped classrooms didn't begin until around 2007, although this is one of those ideas that critics say has been around in some form long before the buzzword was invented. Blended learning, however, is a bit more difficult to define. The first problem is that it can also be called hybrid, technology-mediated instruction, web-based instruction, and mixed mode instruction, which isn't very helpful. Its basic meaning is some combination of online and face-to-face learning, which then leads us to a whole new set of terms to deal with. And this is where Wikipedia becomes very useful. Here we go. Maybe we're talking about a face-to-face driver class, where the teacher drives the instructions and augments with digital tools. Or a rotation class, where students cycle through a schedule of independent online study and face-to-face classroom time. Or maybe it's a flex class. In this case, most of the curriculum is delivered via a digital platform and teachers are available for face-to-face consultation and support. But I'm not done yet. If for our students, all of the curriculum is delivered via a digital platform, but in a consistent physical location, and perhaps they usually take traditional classes as well, then we're talking about a labs class, LABS. Or if the students choose to augment their traditional learning with online coursework, they are doing a self-blend class. And finally, you'll be pleased to learn, they could do an online driver class, where all curriculum and teaching is delivered via a digital platform and face-to-face meetings are scheduled or made available if necessary. No wonder some academics think the term blended is useless and should be retired. So, I hope you've learned something today. If not, go back and listen again because we're going to talk about it in your next lesson. Until next time, this is your Jargon Buster, signing off.
So we're almost done then, Lindsay. I was just thinking about, we were talking about seating. Where do you sit? If you go into a classroom, where do you sit? I've always, because it annoys me so much as a presenter, when I go into a classroom, I always sit on the front row. Because
I always sit, as a teacher, it always annoys me as well. And so I always sit at or near the front. Maybe not right in the front row, but maybe the second row.
Okay. So as close to the front as possible. Because the other thing that my bugbear is that, especially when you're doing kind of a training session or a talk somewhere, nobody ever sits on the front row.
I think that teachers are absolutely terrible at this. In fact, every time I do training with teachers, I see... And well, maybe not just teachers, adults in general, you can see them revert to their childhood state when they walk into a classroom and look where they're going to sit. So you can tell when someone looks around and then finds a seat in the corner by themselves, you think, I can almost see them as a child doing that. And
you can. I always find it funny when somebody comes into one of my talks late. Not funny that they're coming late, but funny they look and the talk's quite full and they're looking around and the only seats at the front, right on the front. And there's kind of this personal glee inside of me that they're late for the talk and they've got to walk all the way to the front. You can see the stress on their face.
Yeah, and I think also I also see the child within when an adult comes. I guess like what I do, comes and sits down right at the front of the class and puts the book out and puts the pen neatly in front of the book and the other thing neatly there, and then kind of sits with their hands crossed onto their laps.
It's like, come on then, entertain me.
It's yes, or a teacher's pet. Yeah, it's interesting how people kind of go to where they always go in a classroom, or people kind of coming in pairs and sitting, or how many spaces do they leave between someone else? So that you come into a classroom, someone's already sitting there. Do you take the seat right next to them, or do you leave one seat between them? It would be an interesting thing to kind of psychologically...
I was going to say, is there a psychological thing behind it, do you think?
I guess there is. Probably in the same way that there's a psychological thing of which urinal do you go to when you go, and there's a million of them.
Always go to the middle, so just to see what the next person does.
So, yes. So you're one of those. I remember you. Anyway, I think this brings us to an end of our classroom discussion. Of course, as always, we'd be interested to hear what you, the listeners, think about anything we said here. Do you agree with the classrooms 100 years ago meme? Where do you sit in a classroom? Or what's a perfect classroom for you? And what were some of the most interesting classrooms you've ever taught in? You can leave comments on our Facebook page or on our blog. I think we're coming to the end, right, Shaun?
I think that's enough. It's a nice, gentle start back for a new season. And yes, it would be good to hear what people think about the classrooms and things that we've said. And of course, we'll provide all the links on TEFLcommute.com so people can pick up and read any of the articles that we've talked about. Nice to be back. Nice to speak to you again, Lindsay.
Yes, good to talk to you, Shaun. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
As your commute is coming to an end, here's an activity you can take into class. Ask students to close their eyes and imagine a classroom from their past. Give them the following questions to think about. Where was the classroom? What did you study there? What was on the walls? How many of you were in the classroom? What were the chairs like? Where were your books? Was there anything written on the tables? Where did you sit? Who was next to you? Was there a window? What could you see out of the window? What did the classroom smell like? What did the classroom feel like? Ask them to open their eyes and tell a partner about what they remember. Feedback in open class. Who had the most interesting or most awful classroom in the past? You can read more about this and find links from this episode at our website, www.teflcommute.com. You've been listening to the TEFL Commute, an original podcast produced and presented by Lindsay Clanfield, Shaun Wilden and James Taylor. Don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing to us on iTunes or YouTube and by visiting us at www.teflcommute.com.